My name is Emily, and I work the closing shift at a dive bar off the highway. It's not much. Dim lighting, scratched-up counters, a jukebox stuck in an endless loop of classic rock. The regulars know each other by name, and the truckers passing through usually leave decent tips. It's quiet most nights, almost predictable. But there's a certain loneliness that comes with working alone, especially on weekdays. It keeps you on your toes. That's why I noticed him the moment he walked in. It was a Tuesday, sometime after 1 a.m., when the door creaked open. He wasn't like the usual crowd. No grease-stained trucker cap, no glazed-over stare from one too many beers. He was older, maybe early 50s, but well put together. A navy turtleneck under a tailored coat, sharp and deliberate, like he had just stepped out of some high-center restaurant and taken a wrong turn. His posture was impeccable, his stride smooth. He had the kind of quiet confidence that people with real money have, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything. He glanced around the bar, scanning the room like he was looking for someone, before locking eyes with me and heading straight to the counter. "Scotch? Need?" His voice was smooth, polite, like he was used to people listening when he spoke. I grabbed a bottle from the top shelf without thinking. He didn't hesitate, didn't glance at the price. I poured the drink, and as I slid the glass toward him, he smiled. "You like working here?" It was a harmless enough question. People asked all the time. I gave him my usual answer. "Yeah, pays the bills." He nodded, swirling the scotch in his glass. "Ever thought about doing something bigger?" I forced a chuckle. "This is big. You should see what I used to do." He seemed to consider that for a moment, then smiled again, like I'd just failed some kind of test. He took a slow sip, placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter, and walked out without another word. I watched him go, feeling the slightest prickle of unease. Something about the whole interaction stuck with me, but I shook it off. Rich guys have their quirks. I figured I'd never see him again. I was wrong. A week later he came back, but this time he wasn't alone. The door swung open just after midnight, and there he was. Same impeccable posture, same quiet composure. But it was the woman who caught my attention. She was younger, mid-30s maybe, but something about her didn't sit right. She was dressed stylishly, but in a way that felt off, like she was trying too hard to blend in with a younger crowd. Her makeup was flawless, but the way she carried herself, it felt rehearsed, calculated. They walked up to the bar, and before I could even ask for their order, she leaned in with a bright plastic smile. "Oh my God," she said, reaching out to brush her fingers along my arm. "You are so pretty." Something about her touch lingered just a second too long. I pulled back slightly, forcing a polite laugh. "Thanks. What can I get you?" She ignored the question. "You been working here long?" "A while." She smiled wider. "You must be so good with people. You have such a great energy." I glanced at the man, but he said nothing, just watched. The woman leaned in conspiratorially, lowering her voice like we were sharing a secret. "I run private events, exclusive parties. We always need people like you. Fun, vibrant. You could make so much money." I forced another polite smile. "I'm good, thanks." She tilted her head, her expression unwavering. "It's totally safe. We pay up front. 10 grand for a weekend." That number sent a chill through me. People don't offer strangers 10 grand for nothing. I was about to shut it down completely when the door opened and a group of regulars stumbled in, laughing. The woman's eyes flicked toward them, and for the briefest second her entire expression shifted, just a tiny crack in the mask. She turned to the man beside her, and without another word they stood up and left. I watched them go, my stomach twisted in knots. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As I locked up and stepped into the parking lot, I noticed a car across the street, headlights off. Just sitting there. I walked to my car quickly, forcing myself to stay calm. As I pulled out of the lot, I checked my mirrors. The car pulled out too. My hands clenched the wheel. I took a random left turn. The car followed. Another turn. Still there. My heart pounded. I was only 5 minutes from home, but I wasn't about to lead them there. Thinking fast, I veered into the parking lot of a police station. The car behind me hesitated, then peeled off into the night. I sat there for a long time, trying to steady my breathing. A few nights later, the woman came back. Alone. The bar was empty when the door creaked open. I looked up, and there she was, standing in the doorway with that same plastic smile. I felt my stomach drop. I discreetly grabbed my phone and sent a text to my boss. She walked up to the counter and folded her hands neatly. "Thought I'd come check on you," she said. I didn't smile. "We're about to close," she pouted, tilting her head. "Just one drink? An old-fashioned?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to kick her out, but I figured buying time was the safest option. I turned to grab a bottle. Click. The sound of the front door locking. My head snapped up. Through the glass I saw it. A black van idling outside. My pulse went wild. Then, metal rattling from the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I didn't think. I grabbed the heaviest thing within reach, a metal shaker, and clutched it like a weapon while dialing 911 with my other hand. The woman didn't move. Didn't panic, just watched. Then, headlights in the lot. My boss. The second his truck pulled in, the sounds at the back door stopped. The woman turned, walked to the entrance, and stepped outside. The van peeled out of the lot with a screech. I ran to my boss, breathless, shaking. Security footage showed everything. Before the woman had entered, 2 masked figures had been crouched outside the bar. One by the front entrance, the other at the back door. Another was waiting in the van. They'd been planning to grab me. The police ran the license plate of the van. It was unregistered, no leads, nothing. I don't work alone anymore. My boss made sure of that. But I still think about it. About how they knew I was alone that night. About what would have happened if I'd stepped outside. Most of all, I think about him. The man in the suit. The one who started it all. I never saw him again. But I still wonder if he's out there, watching, waiting. I still think about that night, about the black van, about the way they knew I was alone, about the man in the suit who started it all. I wonder if he's still out there, watching, waiting. The worst part is that nothing ever came of it. No arrests, no clues, no resolution. Just an unregistered vehicle and a sickening feeling that it wasn't over. The police told me to be careful. My boss made sure I never worked alone again, and I did my best to move on, to convince myself that maybe I was just another near victim they'd move on from. But when you come that close to being taken, when you can still hear the sound of someone trying to force open a locked door while you stand frozen inside, clutching a shaker like it's a weapon, you don't just forget. You don't just let it go. I wasn't the only one. Jake worked the night shift at a gas station just outside of town. I didn't know him well, only that he was young, early 20s, quiet but polite. He'd come into the bar sometimes after his shift, looking dead tired but grateful for a drink. After my incident, my boss had warned all of us to be extra careful, especially those of us who worked nights, so I wasn't surprised when I saw Jake come in one evening, looking more shaken than usual. He didn't say much at first, just sat there nursing a whiskey, staring at the counter like he was somewhere else entirely. When I asked if he was okay, he just let out a short, humorless laugh and said, "I think I almost got kidnapped last night." That got my attention real fast. He told me everything, and the more he talked, the more that awful feeling crept over me. The same feeling I had when I realized that woman knew I was alone, when I saw the van waiting outside, when I knew without a doubt that if my boss had been just a few minutes later, I wouldn't be here to tell my story. Jake had been outside taking a break, rubbing his hands together against the cold. The neon glow of the gas station sign flickered above him, humming softly in the silence of the night. The place didn't get much business past midnight, just the occasional trucker or traveler stopping for gas before disappearing down the highway. But then he saw something just out of the corner of his eye. Movement near the pumps. A man in a dark brown hoodie stood there, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched. There was no car. Jake didn't like that. He stepped back inside, keeping an eye on the guy through the glass. He wasn't moving toward the store, wasn't even pretending to check the pumps. Just standing there, shifting slightly, like he was working up the nerve to do something. The minutes ticked by, and finally the man started toward the door. Jake tensed up as he pushed inside, the bell chiming above him. He walked straight to the counter, his gaze sharp, assessing. Then, in a rushed, almost rehearsed way, he muttered that his car had broken down just before the station, that he needed a jump, maybe just a little gas to get to the next town. Jake didn't buy it. He told him he could call a tow truck instead. The man shook his head, too quick. No, that's not necessary. Just need some help under the hood. Something about the way he said it made Jake's stomach tighten. People walk into gas stations at odd hours all the time, and they're usually a little weird, but this wasn't normal. There was something off about the way he spoke, the way he watched Jake, like he was testing him. That's when Jake glanced at the security monitor behind him. The station had cameras that covered the lot, and sure enough, a car was parked just beyond the highway entrance, barely in view. But that didn't make sense. Jake had just been outside. He would have seen it. His gut told him to look closer, and when he did, his blood ran cold. Someone was crouching behind the car, just out of view. Jake forced a casual smile, nodding like he believed the guy's story. "All right, let me just grab my phone from the back." He turned slowly, not wanting to spook him, but the second he was out of direct sight, he slammed his hand onto the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm blared through the store, a piercing shriek that cut through the quiet. Jake expected the guy to panic, to stammer out some excuse, maybe even bolt, but he didn't. Instead, he relaxed. His nervous energy disappeared, his entire posture shifting into something eerily calm, like he'd just been waiting to see what Jake would do. And then he smiled. Not a panicked smile, not an embarrassed one either, a slow, knowing grin, like this was funny to him. Then, without another word, he turned and ran. Jake rushed to the monitors just in time to see two figures emerging from behind the car. They weren't heading toward it, they were running into the woods. By the time the police arrived, the car was still there, but the men were gone. No footprints leading away, no sign of them anywhere. One of the officers pointed out something Jake hadn't noticed before. The front passenger door was open. There had been a third person inside the car the whole time. The police ran the plates. The car had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, over 100 miles away. No one had come forward to claim it. No reports of missing persons. No other crimes linked to it. Just an abandoned vehicle in the middle of nowhere with no explanation. Jake finished his drink and let out a shaky breath. "You ever just know something was about to go really, really bad?" I nodded. "Yeah, I do." We sat there for a while, neither of us saying much, just thinking. Something was happening, something bigger than just my experience, bigger than what happened to Jake. I didn't know what, and I didn't know why, but I knew one thing for sure: it wasn't over. I wish I could say Jake's story was the end of it, that whatever was happening, the near abductions, the stolen cars, the figures waiting in the dark, was just some awful coincidence, a one-off brush with something sinister. But deep down, I knew better. And when Sarah's story surfaced, when I saw the fear in her eyes, the way Jake and I had seen it in each other's, I knew for sure that we weren't just unlucky. We were being watched. Sarah worked the night shift at the Walmart off the highway, the only 24-hour place within miles. She told me she liked it better than day shifts. Fewer customers, less stress, just quiet hours of stocking shelves and the occasional bored traveler looking for a charger or a six-pack. It was routine, predictable, until the night she saw him. She didn't notice him at first, not in any conscious way. He was just another customer, wandering the electronics aisle, hands in his pockets, not really looking at anything. But the longer she worked, the more she realized something was off. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to. Every time she glanced up, he was somewhere nearby, hovering at the edge of her vision, just close enough to be noticed, just far enough to make it seem unintentional. At first, she told herself she was imagining it. Night shift paranoia. People loiter all the time, waiting for someone, killing time. But the way he moved, the way he always seemed to be watching, it started to unnerve her. When she finally worked up the nerve to radio for security, she realized with a jolt of dread that her radio was dead. She didn't remember the batteries being low, but now the thing was useless in her hands. She started debating whether to find a manager when a hand clamped around her arm. She nearly screamed, but before she could react, a woman's voice rang out, loud, cheerful, overly familiar. There you are! I've been looking everywhere for you. Sarah turned, heart hammering. She didn't recognize the woman at all, but the grip on her arm was firm, and the stranger's face was split into a wide, friendly grin, like they were old friends reuniting. Before she could say anything, the woman leaned in, lowering her voice to a whisper. That guy's been recording you. Follow me. Sarah's blood ran cold. She didn't question it. She let the woman pull her along, let her chatter on loudly about something, maybe a trip, maybe a story, maybe a joke. Sarah wasn't listening. Her mind was reeling, her stomach tight with fear. Had he really been recording her? She wanted to turn around, to see if he was still there, but she couldn't. The woman was leading her through the store quickly, steering her past registers and self-checkouts, away from the busiest areas. At some point, Sarah risked a glance back. The man was gone. Relief flooded through her. I think we're okay now, she said, voice shaking. We should find a manager. The woman squeezed her arm tighter. Just a little further, she said, still smiling. That was when Sarah noticed where they were headed. They had passed the registers, past the main aisles. The store was emptier here, the overhead lights humming softly above the warehouse entrance. The loading dock exit loomed ahead, dimly lit, rarely used, the one door without security cameras. Sarah's relief turned to terror. She dug her heels in, twisting her arm, trying to break free. Let go, she said, keeping her voice calm, steady. The woman smiled wider, unfazed. Come on, just a little further. Sarah's stomach twisted. She yanked her arm as hard as she could, staggering back. The woman's grip slipped just enough for her to break free. Sarah didn't hesitate. She turned and ran, bolting toward the front of the store, lungs burning, pulse pounding in her ears. She heard the woman call out behind her, her voice still bright, still friendly, but it was what she said that made Sarah's legs nearly give out beneath her. She called her by name. Sarah never told her name. She didn't stop running until she saw one of her co-workers sprinting toward her, responding to her screams. Security was called. The woman was gone, so was the man. The cameras showed everything. They had walked into the store together. The man's face was caught on camera, clear as day. But the woman, somehow, in every frame, her face was turned away. Sarah's hands were shaking when she told me. I didn't have anything to say, because I knew what that kind of fear felt like. The sick realization that someone had been watching, studying, waiting. I thought about the man in the suit, about the woman with the plastic smile, about the black van and the unregistered plates. I thought about Jake's stolen car, about the figures disappearing into the woods. I thought about the way Sarah's voice trembled when she said she knew my name, and I knew, without a doubt, that we weren't just unlucky, we were being hunted. If there's one thing these stories prove, it's that danger doesn't always come with flashing warning signs. It doesn't announce itself with a scream in the night or a masked figure lurking in the shadows. More often than not, it comes dressed in something ordinary. A well-dressed man with a charming smile, a stranded traveler asking for help, a stranger who seems to be on your side. It preys on trust, on routine, on the moments when we let our guard down. For Emily, it was a smooth-talking man who made his approach feel harmless, followed by a woman who knew exactly what to say to lower her defenses. Had she stepped outside that bar, had she not trusted her instincts, she might have disappeared without a trace. For Jake, it was a fake emergency, a staged scenario designed to lure him into an ambush. The people waiting in the shadows weren't there by accident. They were there for him, and for Sarah, it was the illusion of safety, the false comfort of a helpful stranger who wasn't trying to protect her at all, but to lead her somewhere she wouldn't be found. These stories aren't just horror tales. They're warnings. If something feels off, trust your gut. If a situation doesn't make sense, don't try to rationalize it. Act. People with bad intentions count on hesitation. They count on you not wanting to seem rude, not wanting to make a scene. Don't give them that power. If someone is making you uncomfortable, tell someone. If you're being followed, go somewhere public, somewhere safe. Don't go home. Don't give them an easy target. Always have a backup plan. Always be aware of your surroundings. Most importantly, don't assume it can't happen to you. The people in these stories weren't careless. They weren't naive. They were doing their jobs, living their lives, and yet they were targeted anyway. The truth is, you don't have to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes, the wrong people will come looking for you. Stay cautious, stay aware, stay safe. And to those of you who stuck around to hear these stories, thank you. Your support, your time, and your engagement mean everything to this channel. The more we share these experiences, the more we remind each other to stay vigilant, to trust our instincts, to take threats seriously, because at the end of the day, awareness can be the difference between a close call and a tragedy. This is Enigma of the Unknown. Stay safe out there, and as always, thanks for listening.